then, even if it wasn't you, you'll be able to answer this.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in Orthodoxy, I should let me preface this with my upbringing going to Hagee's church. I wasn't steeped in theological knowledge by any means. So I'm not like knocking a Protestant or anything by saying now that I've become Orthodox, I've learned this. It's because I'm 46 years old. I got into Orthodoxy when I was 44. So I'm of an age and of a mindset where I want to study these things a lot more than I used to as a teenager, certainly. But I did not understand that the word of God is Christ. And
Mm-hmm.
I think now, based on at least that interaction you and I had with this gentleman on Twitter who was not Orthodox, but
Mm-hmm.
was kind of defending Zionism, he capitalized he put a lowercase w for word of God, and he was under the understanding that the Bible is the word of God rather than the capital WORD word of God is Christ. Is that
Mm-hmm.
a common misconception?
Oh, very much so. Which you would think that considering the beginning of the gospel according to John, it says, in the beginning was the word, and the word
Correct.
was with God, and the word was God.
Yeah.
You would think that that wouldn't be. But see, the Protestants, especially the low church Protestants, Luther was in a bit of a different situation. The Anglicans, a bit of a different situation. But the low church Protestants are very much in the same situation that the Jews were in AD 90, where the proto-Pharisaic, early rabbis were in. They have a book full of traditions, full of knowledge, full of information, but they have now been cut off from the living embodiment of that book, of that knowledge. The temple was gone, the community was gone. Now they have to the rabbis had to pick up and figure out how to carry on. Your low church Protestants, they came about at a time when you had a printing press, they could get their hands on a copy of the Bible, but they were denied the sacerdotal religion of Roman Catholicism. There were no priests. They didn't have any. They could not partake of the sacrifice of the Mass. So they had to, and they're completely cut off. They have no living tradition, no continuity with the first century church. So here they are, they have a book and they have to invent a religion. And that's, in my opinion, that's exactly what the evangelical, proto-evangelicals, the early Baptists, the early low church, the Presbyterians, they took the Bible and they invented a religion. And the
Mhm.
religion is centered around the word. It's centered around study. It's centered around teaching. The
Mm.
same as rabbinical
Wow.
Judaism is centered around the word. It's centered around teaching. Neither of those two have an actual sacrifice. The modern Jews are waiting for the temple to be rebuilt so that sacrifices can be restarted and they can be restored. The Protestants, the low church Protestants, are telling you they don't need a sacrifice, that it's all about mental. It's a mental ascent, it's mental study, it's learning. And so,
Mm.
given that fact, I understand why they essentially have deified the Word of God. In their opinion, what is the Word of God? So the Word of God is Christ. The Bible's very clear about that. He is the Logos, He's the eternal Word, begotten before all ages. But they have to have a source of authority. So the low church Protestants, they're cut off from the sacerdotal religion. They have no continuity with the first century. They need an authority. So they have made the Bible into the Quran. When you talk to them, they will tell you the Bible was eternal. The Bible was pre-existing. The Bible's always been here.
Right. Yeah.
And I say, no, that's the Quran. You've got the wrong monotheistic religion. The Quran was pre-existing in heaven in golden form. Christ is the eternal word of God, and the Bible is are words about the word. The Bible is the Gospels, which tell the story of Jesus Christ, who is the Word of God, or they're epistles which detail traditional teachings of the church at the point in which that was written down. In the case of Revelations, it records prophecies, visions that were given to the Apostle John. But that's not the Word of God. All of that, everything in that book from the New Testament arose within the Orthodox Church. It was written by Orthodox Christians
Yes.
for other Orthodox Christians. It was never meant to be used independent of the oral teachings that were accompanying it. There's nothing in that Bible, the New Testament, that says, how do you baptize? How do you ordain? There's no
Hmm.
steps
Oh.
because didn't write any of that down. They didn't need to. They weren't sending a book off into a void to be a missionary. The books accompanied the missionaries who taught you what you needed to know. We also had the hymnography. So in Orthodoxy, we don't just preserve knowledge through the Bible, we preserve knowledge through as well hymnography. So our hymns, our services. When the Orthodox Church was asked to comment on the Dormition of Mary, the Patriarch of Constantinople back in the 50s sent a copy of the book for that feast day, of the service for the feast day. Here's my comment. So
Right.
we also use iconography as well. So we have multiple sources of maintaining our tradition, multiple sources of authority that work with our own hierarchy, who is descended from the apostles through the laying on of hands. So Protestants don't have any of that, and they have really turned the Bible into an idol. Some of them you really can't even talk to. So you try to say, okay, where'd you get the Bible from? God. Well, God did not hand down the Bible on Mount Sinai. That's the Ten
Mm-hmm.
Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
Where did you get these books of the New Testament? And they cannot really necessarily have that conversation with you. And so that's why I try to correct the Protestants. I'm not trying to be mean. And a
Sure.
lot of us that work with Orthodox Reflection, we just say, look, Jesus Christ is the Word of God.
Right.
You don't necessarily have faith in God as much as you have faith in your understanding of the New Testament, an understanding that arose completely isolated from the historic church.